Well, momentous things happening over in the UK where former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced he is stepping down from Parliament, claiming he was the victim of an anti-Brexit witch hunt. Well, joining us now from London is GB News host and a great friend of Outsiders, Nigel Farage. Nigel, great to see you. You're coming out to Australia soon. We'll talk about that in a minute. But tell us, what does this mean for Brexit? Boris Johnson has gone.
Yes, I mean, the trouble is, Rowan, that Boris Johnson gave his enemies too many open goals. I'm afraid his prime ministership during lockdown was amateur at best. There were all sorts of wild parties going on inside Downing Street, whilst the rest of us were told we couldn't go and see our elderly parents. And he said, I didn't know about it. So he gave ammunition to the enemy. But, and here's the point, there has been, ever since that referendum 7 years ago, a concerted campaign by the globalists, the big multinationals, the political class, the London elites, to overturn the referendum result. They've been out to get Boris, and he made the mistake of giving them the opportunity. And now with him gone, the only person in the Conservative Party with even, half an ounce of populism is out. The Remainers are in control. They're Social Democrats. They're big state. They're high tax. They're open door immigration. Frankly, there isn't much to choose between them and Labour. And I now think the Conservative Party is utterly doomed at the next election. And I would say to Boris Johnson, think hard. We've got to find a way of realigning British politics towards a centre-right direction. Let's see whether he's got the guts to do it.
Rita.
Well, when he was centre-right, when he was championing Brexit, he won in this massive landslide. We thought he was going to be Prime Minister for over a decade. But in government, he became a global warming alarmist. He didn't govern like a Conservative. What will his legacy be? And did he really give us Brexit, or was it a watered-down Brexit?
Well, you're right. I mean, look, no one did more to put Boris in that position than me. I won those European elections of May 2019. Mrs. May resigned because of the humiliation. Boris took over. I then stood aside for Boris to get that majority that he did. I'm very disappointed with the net zero fanaticism, with net migration to Britain running at levels we've never seen in the history of our islands. I mean, more people have come in the last 10 years than came in the previous 2,000 years. I mean, think about that. But the really big thing is the most important constitutional decision we've taken in our lifetimes, namely Brexit, to free ourselves from the EU. And on that, Boris was right. He did have the guts to back it. He did, as Prime Minister, get us out. Now, we haven't taken advantage of it, but he only has one legacy. His only legacy is that we got out of the European Union. And if we get a massive Labour majority, the next 5 years takes us back in, all of that is gone.
Nigel, just quickly, you always save your best announcements for Outsiders. Will you be running a net zero party at the next election, and will you be asking Boris to kind of support you the way that you supported him?
Well, I've always said that I couldn't, I've done what I've done in the past. I've won a couple of European elections, but I've always said to completely realign British politics, I couldn't do it on my own, all right? But if there are now people like Boris Johnson and others realising that the Conservative Party is now part of the problem and not the solution, well, I think it's more possible today than it's been at any point before. That's no guarantee that it will happen, but certainly these conversations are now taking place.
James.
Nigel, I want to go across the pond, as it were, and ask you about your old friend Donald Trump. He's just been indicted by prosecutors in Florida over this whole thing with keeping the documents all over the place in Mar-a-Lago. I want to get your take on that. And do you see this as part of the same kind of push against Boris Johnson happening against Donald Trump. The same sort of thing of having to undo, not in this case the Brexit referendum, but really the 2016 election.
Look, the globalists never forgave us for 2016. Brexit led the way. Trump, of course, followed on. They've done their best to say we were funded by the Russians, not true, and many other conspiracy theories and impeachments and, in the end, libel actions and goodness knows what else. A couple of points to make about Donald Trump. Number one, the classified documents. Well, remember, a whole load of classified documents were found in Biden's basement, and yet that apparently doesn't matter. But the other point here, I spoke today to a long-term senior prosecutor in the US. He said never in his life, ahead of a trial, have the press been given photographs of the so-called evidence. Now, whether those pictures are genuine or true isn't the point. The fact is they're putting out their own PR. The prosecution are putting out their own PR ahead of the hearing that'll take place on Tuesday. And all of this, with a politicized judiciary, this decision to go for Trump on this issue could not have happened without White House approval. And you're reaching a point in America where the judiciary is falling into contempt. I don't for a moment pretend that big characters like Boris Johnson and Donald Trump aren't at times a bit slapdash. Don't make the odd mistake. Perhaps they're a bit careless. Don't behave like accountants. But these are far from being criminal. And the idea that Trump, of all people, could be potentially committing an act of espionage, I can't think of anybody more patriotic. America is in now a very worrying, very, very divided place. And at stake for all of us is the future of Western civilization. These are really scary times.
Rita.
It is a scary time because we've got the Justice Department, the FBI, the CIA seemingly hijacked by political ideologues, and you're seeing antics that you'd expect to see in a banana republic, a despot nation where the chief political opponent of the sitting president is being targeted by this political prosecution.
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole thing is disgusting. I was with Trump last month. He was over in Scotland at his Turnberry golf course last month, and I spent some time with him. You know what? Amazing bloke. I mean, I took some stick, believe you me. I took some real stick for years. I was public enemy number one here in Britain. But in America and around much of the world, I mean, Trump is treated far worse than President Xi of China, despite the human rights abuses that are committed there. And this is all part of that same phenomenon, whether it's Brexit, whether it's Trump, the globalists wish to overcome. And we have got the fight of our lives in all of our countries on our hands.
Nigel, part of the fight of that life will be you coming out to Australia very soon, in a few weeks' time. I'll be giving all the details of that later in Outsiders, which is really important. People get their chance to see you and some amazing people you'll be on stage with. But just quickly before you go, what would that realignment of British politics look like? I've always said you shouldn't be sitting there in your living room, Nigel. You should be sitting in 10 Downing Street. I've been saying that for a decade. What would a realignment of British politics look like, very briefly?
It would look like a coming together of enough people in the Conservative Party and people like me who left it a long, long time ago, and also some patriotic, working class ex-Labour types as well. And we get together on the basis that sovereign countries look after their own people first. Sovereign countries control their borders, which we're not doing. Sovereign countries reach out to their friends in the world, not those who are potentially enemies, and that actually the pursuit of GDP is not the same as the pursuit of people being happy within their communities in their countries. So, we need a real patriotic alliance, one that believes in the little guy, one that says the corporates shouldn't rule our world. And that's what's needed. And who knows, it may well happen. That's what, I want to try and precipitate in the UK. But on the big issues, the big ticket of your future, our future, America's future, remember this: Western civilization is under attack. The silent majority have got to stand up, speak, fight, put their hands in their pockets, go and walk the streets, put out leaflets, do what they can. All it takes, as Edmund Burke once said, for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing. And that's why I'm coming in early July to Australia with Alex Antic, Donald Trump Jr., and we're going to go around and say to audiences, don't just come along tonight and clap, get involved.
Fantastic. Nigel Farage, can't wait to see you out here in Australia in only a couple of weeks' time. And thanks so much for staying up late this evening in London to talk to us live on Outsiders. Thanks, Nigel. We'll see you very, very soon.